Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I was the Green Party candidate and the Socialist Party candidate for president in 2020. And this podcast, Green Socialist Notes, is about educating and organizing around the eco-socialist program that Angela Walker and I ran on. And we have a guest today, Aaron Reveles, who is running for school board in East LA area. And I'll tell you more about him just after a few comments. I think we should be aware of what's going on internationally. And there are two big things going on right now. There are uprisings, or at least resistance, in Iran and Russia. And of course, you know the Iran uprising was precipitated by the killing of Gina Amini, who's a 23-year-old Kurdish woman, by Iran's so-called morality police for not wearing her hijab properly. Now, the regime and the international media calls her by the Persian name that she had to put on her documents, Masa, but her real Kurdish name is Gina. And that kind of reflects does reflect the cultural genocide against Kurds in Iran that criminalizes the teaching of Kurdish in schools and eliminates Kurdish names in official documents. But these mass protests have been led by Iranian women, and it's now entering its fourth week. And the slogan that they use in most of these demonstrations, or the most common chant, is "Women, Life, Freedom," which they've taken from the famous slogan of the revolutionary struggle of leftist women in Rojava in Syria, "Women, Life, Freedom." Another chant is "Death to the Dictator," which is an old slogan in Iran going back to the protests and then revolution against the Shah. But at this point, hundreds have been shot to death or beaten to death by regime security forces, with thousands more injured by rubber bullets and beatings. There have been mass arrests of thousands more who are suffering beatings and torture in the prison system, security system of Iran. And it's pretty brutal. I mean, there's a case of this 16-year-old activist, Nika Shakarami, who messaged a friend before she disappeared. She'd gone to a demonstration that she was being pursued by security forces, and she just disappeared. Her family found her in a police morgue about 10 days later, and they said, okay, you can take her body to the father's hometown where they plan a burial. And in another unspeakably cruel act, the authorities stole her body and buried her 25 miles from that town. So, I mean, that's the kind of, serious repression that's going on in trying to discourage the protesters. But, and they're also trying to blame outsiders. Of course, it's the CIA or whoever, and also leftist Kurds in Iraq. So Iran's been bombing with drones leftist Kurdish communities in Iraq, some of which do contain Iranian Kurds in exile. But it's getting serious. It's getting broader. Now workers have started to go on strike, including significantly teachers who are, like a belt line for the regime's ideology. And they're out striking in solidarity both with the women and for their own demands. And this has been raised by the working class in Iran in a lot of rounds of strikes in recent years. And in fact, the hashtag General Strike is all over Iranian social media now. So it's not just about the hijab, it's about the authoritarian rule of the regime, and they're demanding freedom and democracy. And it's a life and death struggle now for these people, especially the young women. They're in the lead, but they're fighting for their lives, because if they back down now, as we've seen in previous uprisings in Iran, the regime will massacre thousands to consolidate their rule and intimidate the opposition. I mean, that's what happens in revolutions. You either win or the authorities are going to massacre the people who revolted in a counter-revolution. In 1979, it was women who were the cutting edge of the mass protests against the Shah. And the turning point was when many of the Shah's security forces decided they could no longer shoot down women in the streets. And they went over to the side of the revolution. There are reports that some of the current regime security forces are doing the same. And then a big factor in 79 again was the workers on strike, which at that point the Shah fled and a struggle for power among the opposition forces began. And, a lesson that we should learn from this is that, the progressive forces made the mistake of trusting their Islamist allies in overthrowing the Shah, and thought that if the Islamists, took power, they promised a, bourgeois democratic regime with elections and so forth. But as they consolidated power, they started rounding up the leftists and executing them, tens of thousands over the next decade. And finally, in 88, it culminated in the execution of 30,000 leftist prisoners who had been in prison. And so the left is, since then has been in a weak position in Iran. There are no mass socialist organizations, at least above ground that we know of. There are liberal capitalist and monarchist forces trying to take advantage of this uprising and provide leadership, but reports are without much success, because that's not what the people out on the streets want. It's the radical youth and women and workers who have the initiative now. But what they need to develop, and they need to do it quickly, is a full program for progressive democratic change, an organization to spread it and take power to implement it. And the success of the progressive democratic change depends on whether they're able to do that in the fluid situation that exists right now. So I'll stop there. I used to demonstrate with Iranian student leftists in the 1970s against the Shah and the police agency that was his tool of repression, the Savak. And, after 79, they went back for the revolution. And I sometimes wonder how many of them survived the counter-revolution. So it's a serious situation in Iran. And, we should provide what solidarity we can with Iranian organizations and, just speak up in solidarity with those people fighting for their rights. And then meanwhile, in Russia, you have the rebellion of the refuseniks. Russia's radically changed since Putin announced the so-called partial mobilization for Russia's war in Ukraine. I mean, the Ukrainians I've been in touch with on the left and others who are not so ideological, they keep saying they wish the Russians would protest like the Iranians and be more militant and disruptive like the Iranians are. And they kind of scoff at the polite protests of the middle-class youth in Moscow and St. Petersburg who just quietly wait to get arrested. Ukrainians want them to fight back and cause a bigger disturbance. But actually, there's a lot of resistance going on. It's mostly underground. There's sabotage against the war, including the firebombing of military recruitment offices and the derailing of military trains. And that's done by underground groups, not as part of mass protests. But there are mass protests in the regions of the non-Russian nationalities in the Caucasus and Central and East Asia. And those nationalities are being disproportionately drafted for this war. And so they have a beef right there. So the biggest problem for Putin, and this is people who aren't protesting in Russia, they're leaving. We know over 300,000 men have fled Russia for neighboring countries, including 2 people who took a boat to Alaska. And that's more than the 300,000 that Putin wanted to conscript in his so-called partial mobilization. So what's changed is that Putin has broken the unwritten but understood social contract in Russia, which is that the government will let you lead your private lives out in the capitalist economy as long as you stay out of politics. But Putin's mobilization has pushed politics right into people's private lives, and that could spell trouble for Putin. Russia's losing ground in the provinces it just claimed to have annexed. Our reports are that while the Ukrainians are highly motivated, the Russian soldiers are not. And there's a history, a tradition almost in Russia of radical change following losing wars. The abolition of serfdom in 1861 came after losing the Crimean War to the Ottoman Empire a few years before. The introduction of the Duma, a parliament, very unrepresentative parliament, but anyway, a gesture by the Tsar after the 1905 revolutionary uprising, which was went on the tails of Russia losing the war of choice against Japan. And then, of course, the Russian Revolution of 1917 was spearheaded initially by angry, hungry soldiers in the rear who, decided they'd had enough and they went after the regime. And then you have the disintegration of the Soviet Union after it lost its war in Afghanistan. So this has happened before. And if the Ukraine war precipitates Putin's downfall, then the question becomes, well, what will take its place? The U.S. foreign policy establishment is worried that a more militarist and authoritarian leader could replace Putin. I think that's a realistic worry. Or worse, that the country could break up into sections controlled by competing warlords, each with their own nuclear weapons. That's a nightmare. And on the other hand, there's some Russian socialists like Boris Kargalitsky who are very optimistic, saying that the disintegration of Putin will enable progressive social change. All I can say is I hope he's right. So those are my reflections on two big movements in far away from us, but definitely having an impact on us. So let's go to our guest and talk about what his campaign's about. Aaron Reveles is a teacher in the Los Angeles Unified School District, which is the second largest school district in the country after New York City, with 1,300 schools and 670,000 students. You may remember the strike in January 2019 by 35,000 teachers in Los Angeles, demanding pay raises, smaller class sizes, support staff of nurses, counselors, and librarians, and curtailing the proliferation of charter schools. And I think they won much of what they wanted, not all of what they wanted, particularly on the issue of charter schools and curtailing their expansion, although I understand some state legislation may help them in that regard. But Aaron is running for a school district next door to Los Angeles Unified School District, the Montebello Unified School District, which is on the east side of Los Angeles and includes the communities of Montebello or parts of Montebello, Monterey Park, Commerce, Bell Gardens, Pico Rivera, East LA, and some even smaller parts of others. So it's really on the east side Latino community. It has 29 schools and 23,000 students. Minority enrollment is 100%, of which 95% are Latino. And about 55% of the students are defined as economically disadvantaged. So that's, Aaron can probably tell you more about his, about the school district and his election. But I'll just add that the election is nonpartisan on the ballot, but Aaron is a member of the Peace and Freedom Party of California. And he had it in his logo. It had hashtag Green Socialist before, but I think he's a Green Socialist too. So I'm glad you're here, Aaron. Tell us about who you are and what your campaign's about.
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. And again, my name is Aaron Reveles. I was born in Boyle Heights, so that's one of the east side neighborhoods of Los Angeles, right next to East LA. But now I live in one neighborhood over in East LA. I'm a proud social studies teacher, so I teach AP US History, AP European History with the Los Angeles Unified School District. I'm in my union, and I'm a proud socialist. Both the school district that I work for, as well as the school district that I live in, have many of the same problems that the school districts across the country are facing. We've seen the past couple of years, we really see how overworked and underpaid our teachers are. Our classrooms are overcrowded. Some classrooms have more than 30 students in a classroom. And we're faced continuous attacks on our unions. So even by not only just Republicans, but even Democrats are attacking our unions. And we're blamed for the districts and government's offices' malices and even their incompetence. So anytime something goes wrong, every time there's something the district messes up, either unintentionally because they don't know what they're doing, or maliciously, like teachers get blamed for the after results. And the bureaucracy in the district and many of our school boards, they seem like they're hell-bent on making the conditions worse for us teachers and other educators, as well as even our students. They're doing almost next to nothing to solve our teacher shortage. I mean, in Florida, they're bringing troops to teach because they can't find enough teachers. Not only are they doing this, but they're also advocating of staffing our schools with more police. So instead of bringing in teachers to solve these teacher shortages, they're just trying to bring police into our schools, and they conduct war on working class people. They throw our students into prisons, um, and as well as the district and the school board, they're working together across our country. They most of the time embezzle millions of dollars from our public education system, so they literally steal food from the mouths of our children. Um, we've had problems in certain school districts in California where they siphon away money from our school lunch programs. Uh, so a lot of these people are coming in as superintendents and school boards, and they're collaborating to really take tax dollars away from hardworking people to spend on their other campaigns, to put into their nonprofits, to just line their own pockets off of the backs of our students. And not only do we have to deal with all this, but we also have to deal with these charter schools. They're extracting local tax dollars for a profit. They're creating spaces where only a select few students are given extra resources, and the rest of the students are treated like second-class citizens in their own neighborhoods. They've even been organizing conservative forces with the backings of millions of dollars to elect pro-charter Republicans and Democrats. And the prop that you were talking about is it's California Law Proposition 39, and it forces our traditional neighborhood schools, our public schools, to give up space to privately operated charter schools. And this has been done in San Francisco with Malcolm X Academy. They were forced to co-locate with KIPP, um, and it lost space for their gardens, their art classes, their one-on-one support, their restorative practices, and their health and wellness services. So when these charter schools come in, they basically take all the extra space that we use for extracurriculars to deal with students who need more help with either mental health, with art, with extracurriculars, and they take it away and they use it for themselves. So it's literally lowering the access that students have to many resources that we need, especially in our diverse working class Latino and Black communities. Um, and not only in California, but I'm sure you've experienced in New York as well as people across the country, that poverty right now is exploding through the roof, and it's causing many parents to really question the people in power. Uh, our school districts are panicking right now because many parents, they're either putting off having children because of the skyrocketing cost of living, or they're leaving for other states, and that is causing our enrollment numbers to drop. And the districts are panicking because they know that means the state will pull funds. And this is just a continuation of Ronald Reagan's policies, not only around the country, but when he was governor of California, he's the first one that really started reducing the public funding of our money, and it has never came back. And I really think we could fix these problems. We can, especially in California and the rest of the country. We're the richest country in the world. California is the richest economy in the fifth richest economy in the entire world. We have enough money to pay our teachers a living wage. We have enough money to fully fund these schools and resources for our students, but we just need effective leaders who will take on that challenge. And that's what I have for what I'm talking to people about, what the conditions our school district is. But more from my campaign, I'm running a working class campaign. A lot of people say they're grassroots, but even these Democrats who have the funding and the political backing of the Democratic Party establishment, they say they're grassroots, which kind of confuses me because it's the backing of millions of dollars and these corporate unions, where I'm telling people, I have the support of the rank and file teachers. I have support of people in our district and the neighboring district, of just people who work regular jobs. They have their 9 to 5s. That's where I'm really gathering my support from. You know, some of the communities in our district, like Bell Gardens, they're 80% renters, and I'm really just trying to talk to those people because they're the people that are majority in our district. We're a working class community, and that's the people I'm trying to get talk to. Some specifics I'm finding in my campaign is a lot of people feel underrepresented because Montebello Unified School District, Montebello only makes up 40% of the entire district, but every single person elected on the board currently is from Montebello, and almost every single person that's running is also from Montebello. So what I'm trying to do is talk to the other 60% and said, hey, we need to find a better system so we can elect people from across the district. So not just Montebello, but also East LA, which makes up 15% of the district, Monterey Park, that makes up 15% of the district, Bell Gardens, that makes up 20% of the district. We need more representation from more people around, just so everyone can feel like they're included, but also so certain schools aren't taking importance over others. Another thing I'm really finding out is people really believe that the district doesn't care about the parents, that there's no effective communication between them. And I'm trying to talk about how we need more town halls. We need to invite the community to our events. Not only that, but we need to hire a full-time person in every school to be a community liaison. So they're going out to the community and seeing what they need, and if there's any problems, for example, like if there's a student who's absent, they're going to that their parents' house and asking where the student is. How can we help them get into school on time, or just there in the first place? Some students, they don't come to school because they don't have clean clothes and they're embarrassed about smelling in front of the other students. So what I'm advocating for is to get every single school washers and dryers so we can clean the clothes for the students so they don't feel embarrassed of coming. I'm advocating for reforms in our district so every single person does not have to work a second job after working at school, because we need people who are 100% focused on giving the students the best education they deserve, and they can't do that if teachers are going and working a second job. We can't do that if our lunch ladies and our secretarial staff are having a second job, so they're tired and exhausted when they come and to help support our students. And really, we're reaching the end of my campaign. uh, I've noticed my opponents who have 10 to 15 times as much money, which us third-party candidates have to deal with all the time. They're getting very nervous. They, one of them came to my door, 2 days ago, asking for me by name and asking me how my campaign was going, even though, we're all looking at each other's stuff. We all know how our campaigns are going. So I think the Democratic Party establishment is really scared of us third-party candidates on a local level, because this is where we really can make some gains and some noise. And whenever they feel like their position is threatened, they really come and try to intimidate us. So I'm trying to run a clean campaign, and I hope my opponents do the same. But as the more they try to intimidate me, the more emboldened me and my supporters become. And I really think we're making a big splash in our community.
Okay. I got one question for you, or just like your comments. It's really striking to me. You're in a school district, or you're running for a school district where every student is a member of a minority, most of them Latino. And I came up in California, a working class community that had Black, Latino, Asians, and Pacific Islanders of many nationalities, Filipinos, you name it. Um, and now it seems California is far more segregated than back then. During the campaign, I spent time in East LA and stayed at this little hotel. And I was there for 5 or 6 days. I never saw another white person. Saw a couple Black people, saw a few South and East Asian people. Everybody else was Latino. And I noticed similarly as I went, like I got to Fremont, California, which when I was coming up was a mixed community, almost all Asian. That's up by the Bay Area. Um, and we know that segregation reinforces inequality. And I think maybe the scariest thing about it is white people get isolated and then buy into all these racial stereotypes about everybody else, and then they become, Trumpy, freaked out, scared people that become reactionaries. So I wonder if that's it all discussed in, debates about education in California, or it's just an issue that nobody wants to tackle. New York's very segregated too, and it's an issue that the two major parties don't even want to touch.
So yeah, for segregation, really, I think the problem is a lot of the Asian communities, they live in certain areas, the Latino communities, they live in certain areas, the Black communities live in certain areas, and the white communities live in certain areas. I really don't think on the school board level there's anything we could be done about it. But what I have been doing is going across city councils, um, not in Los Angeles because they have their city council meetings during the workday when most people are at work. But I've been going around to the smaller cities, advocating for social housing, so that way we can integrate our communities across each other. Because for social housing, it accepts people of low income, middle income, and high income. That's one way we can naturally desegregate our communities, and that's what I've been asking city councils like Downey and Bell Gardens to do, because right now they're really fighting hard for rent control. But I'm like, hey, rent control is nice. We definitely need rent control, but we need to take it a step further. We need the social housing. As for students in the communities, even though we are almost majority Latino, the actual students in that fall under the district, we have a lot of Asian students, but a lot of their students are being sent to neighboring districts just because the parents think those districts are doing better educational wise. So one of the things I'm trying to propose is create more dual language programs, not only for Spanish, but for a Mandarin and any other language that parents feel that they need to be taught. If we can get the students for it, I definitely think it should be taught. That way we could bring more students within our district back into our district, because I think it shows how our district and our current school board is doing. Is if we have so many parents sending their kids to different districts, there's a definite need to improve our district. There's so many when I'm canvassing, there's so many schools that I see, when you see like the proud student of this school or proud graduating class, a lot of those signs that I see are schools from either LAUSD or other districts. So I really want to focus on being more inclusive to other students, to bring them back in. And sometimes that is um, bringing those dual language courses, but also bringing more services for special education students. I see someone in the comments talking about trans students and non-binary students, and how do we offer them support. Right now, what I'm doing, there you go. I've actually went to action to defend trans people against violence and genocide in downtown LA. I invited all the other candidates, but I'm the only one that showed up. And as for the schools, I think we really need to institute workshops for our students to discuss gender and sexuality. And I know that sounds scary to the conservatives and the Republicans, because this is the exact thing they don't want to see. But there's just too much bullying going on in our schools just for of students with different genders or their non-binary or sexuality, and we really need to educate people and students about that. These people exist in our communities. They're around. They're not going away, no matter how much they want them to. So we really should educate each other, not only our students but our communities, about these people, and that they're regular everyday people like us. There's nothing wrong with them. They try to say it's a mental health issue, but there's nothing wrong with these people. They're just trying to live their everyday lives. And we see in many states, especially Republican states, where they're trying to make these people go back underground like they have been for decades. And I think that's unacceptable. And I think really we need to look for anti-bullying campaigns, and also try to institute a system where we can get phones out of our classroom, because not only is it a distraction to our learning, but it's used to bully students so much throughout the day through social media. So I think there's a couple of things we can do to eliminate bullying, and also support our trans and non-binary students in our school.
I really like what you said about social housing, because the root of segregation is the housing market. And, the whole industry is guilty, from the bankers to the lawyers to the real estate brokers. Um, and I won't go elaborate on that, but social housing that is uh, mixed income and sufficient, so that everybody has an affordable option and brings rents down through the whole market, which is a better solution in the long run than rent control. But to desegregate, we got to desegregate housing, desegregate schools. We first need to desegregate housing, because people don't want to be bused, all over the place to communities they don't live in. So I really like that answer. Maria Lopez, Aaron, what makes you more qualified over other candidates for school board?
Yeah, so I'm one of the only two teachers running, so I think that, automatically makes me one of the top two people who are qualified to run for school board. But to push me against the other teacher, I'm the only one with a master's in education, specifically early childhood education. So that goes from pre-K three, so 3 year olds all the way up to sixth grade. And I learned a lot about how students, they start learning languages, they start developing their reading skills, their math skills at a very basic level, even all the way down from the beginnings of object permanence. So I know how students are the best way they can learn starting at home before they even get here. So I can institute programs that would help students when they come for pre-K 4 and 3 and 4, what other people call Head Start and preschool. The one of the biggest things I'm telling people right now is whoever's elected right now is going to pick the next superintendent. I really believe every single superintendent across the country should have a PhD in education, and most often than not, that is not the reality. So I advocate for someone who's even more highly educated than me in that superintendent position, making decisions of how the district's going to move forward with reading and math. I don't know if my opponents know this, but if you're not doing good in reading class, you're not doing in English language arts class, you're not doing good in any of your other classes, because that skill transfers over to every single other subject. Just because we're getting high schoolers who they're at 10th or 11th grade, but they're reading at a fourth grade reading level. So I really want, I know for a fact we need to bring someone in who can help kids learn to have a love for reading at such an early age. And that comes with building their confidence. That comes with having the parents help us out by reading to kids when they're very young. And I know a lot of like just even like little tips and strategies and what is the research backed way to teach students at the best. And that is because I have a master's from one of the top education colleges in our country, Johns Hopkins University, and I think that really puts me ahead of all the other candidates.
Andrew Hager asks, also, Aaron, regarding bullying in any form, do you suppose counseling will also help to prevent any further bullying?
Um, so what I'm taking this as is I really think we need counseling of students who do the bullying, because a lot of the times it's a lot of these bullies get a mere slap on the wrist. They just get, maybe not a lot of their schools don't even give detention or Saturday detention or after school anything. It's really just, like a phone call home or a meeting with a parent. But what we really need to do is, if we have students who are consistently having a problem bullying, whether it's for race or class or different sexuality or genders, because even be like misogyny or any type of bullying, we need to have a program for these kids, like, hey, this is actually your punishment, which is actually going to be education. We have to put them through a workshop to learn how to not, be racist, how to not be classist, how to not be sexist or against other genders and sexualities, because that's really the only way to get people to stop doing these things, is to educate them. I remember listening to the Green Socialist podcast this week, where you can Chris was saying you can convince someone in 10 minutes at an in-person deep canvassing conversation that, hey, trans people, they exist and they deserve to live. And I really think he's right. Like, it's not going to happen on these Facebook comments. It's not going to happen with a slap on the wrist. It's going to happen with real education and taking the time to do it. So that's really what we need to do to prevent and stop any further bullying.
Andrew Hager, Aaron, where do you stand on giving neurodivergent and physically disabled students special needs coverage for them in order to survive a school day without any trauma or mental breakdowns?
I think what they mean by coverage is just more resources. I really think that especially students who have trauma or mental breakdowns, they really need one-on-one support um, for a majority of the day, and we need to bring those resources into the classroom. Currently, our federal government funds only half of what they promised to fund in special education. As well as in our state, we don't fund special education as much as we should. So I have been not only advocating at the local level, but I've been advocating against state assembly members and House of Representatives to fully fund our schools like they promised to. And I've been going, I've been helping. I've been telling people to vote for candidates that aren't necessarily in my party, but that support these higher funding for our education system. California is only the 41st worst ranked in funding students' education, and we are the largest economy in the United States, so we should be the number one in funding students. So I will fight with everything I have to not only on the local level fund more special needs programs, but also fight at the state level because our district has two assembly people that cover it, and I will either struggle against them or work with them if I'm able to bring more funding for these programs. Because a lot of the times, there's some problems that we can't deal with at the district level, but that we can definitely rally people to take it to the state level. And that's something that I don't see any of our school board members doing is if there's something that they need to take to the county level or the state level, they are not doing it. I think you've said before with health coverage or with health insurance or any other nationwide issue, if the Democrats really wanted to, they can rally people to come out into the streets in the millions to fight for these things and shut our streets down, to shut our workplaces down until we get these things, but they don't do it. I will be the candidate that is doing this, that is rallying the support of my community to take these statewide issues and these countrywide issues to the floor. And I'll use my seat on the board to do that. And if I don't win, I'm even taking that to the streets.
Well, I hope we can announce after the election you won, along with a couple other school board candidates we've had on the podcast. Email question: how do your students feel about your campaign?
I have a couple students who like I have middle schoolers and high schoolers, so they're teenagers and preteens. There is not, if you have high school or middle school students, you have been Googled, you have been searched up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. So a lot of them have found my campaign and they've been following it, and then they've been really supportive. They've been like, liking my post. They've been sharing them with their family members and their other students. Unfortunately, for the most part, most of their parents can't vote for me, or their families can't vote for me because I work in the district next to me. But they're loving it. They're repeating stuff that I say that they see in my videos. A couple of them were worried. They're like, "Oh, Mr. Reveles, does this mean you're gonna leave us?" And I'm like, "No. Like, if I win, it's kind of like it's after work. It's the meetings are 6 o'clock in the afternoon, so I'll still be here even if I win. Don't worry." And then, so it makes me feel pretty good that they were worried about me not being their teacher anymore, and that they really they're liking and sharing my stuff amongst the students, which helps me get more traction. So I think that's it's a little heartwarming to hear that my students actually care about the stuff I do when I'm not teaching them, and they support it.
Maria Lopez: my local MU school district elementary school heavily voted against the charter, and it was a KIPP charter, co-location. And when they saw that the community didn't want them, they went above our heads to the administration to do it regardless.
Yeah. So they the chip KIP that many of us have problems with over here in California, but I know that y'all have to deal with them as well in New York. They came in and they proposed a charter co-location to the school board, and they were offered numerous other locations where they would have had their own campus, but they went over the school board's heads. Even though the community came out and forced the school board to vote no, They went to our county education system, and the county education system is filled with they're directly appointed by our five county supervisors, and our five county supervisors are, very right wing conservative Democrats. So they just allowed this KIPP location charter to come in through that Proposition 39 I mentioned earlier. And what that has done to that elementary school, is Gascon Elementary School, is they took a lot of classrooms and chairs and tables and materials that the school uses. They took the newer buildings that have been built, and they use the side of the campus that has a playground and the green areas that kids use to play. So it's really taken up a big portion of the school, and only that, but the kids are segregated from each other. They rarely see each other. They rarely talk to each other. They only see each other in the mornings and during dismissal. They have different lunch times. They have different recess times. It's really creating a atmosphere where the public school students are treated as second class citizens in their own communities, and the charter schools, keep out any students they don't want, because especially with these co-locations, they take the students who are the cream of the crop, who are already doing well, who already have high reading and math levels. They don't take any students that they would need to put a lot of resources in for if they have a certain disability or if they need special education services. They only offer very mild resources to these students, but there's students who have moderate disabilities and severe disabilities, and they don't help those types of students, just the ones need mild supports. And I think that's a really disgusting thing. If I was on the school board, I would have rallied the communities who rallied at this local level and took it up to the county to force them to stop KIPP from bringing this co-location. None of the school board members tried even doing that. I don't think they even know they can do that, because they're so focused on their little locals comfortable school board seat. They don't have the ability, or they don't have the will to imagine bigger.
Matt Owen, how do you propose to reverse the falsification of California's history, now taught from a settler colonial perspective?
I really think for this, I'm a very proud proponent of California history, but which a majority of Californian history is indigenous history. So I really think we need to add a component to our ethnic studies program that teaches California history about the civilizations and the languages and the culture that was here before, it was under an American government, before it was under the Mexican government, and before it was even under a Spaniard government, because California has been over so many under colonial powers that there's so much rich history for the thousands of years, even before the Spaniards first came over here. But we should also teach students about, what happened in California during Spanish occupation, what happened in California during when it was part of Mexico, when California was very briefly its own state, and when how the United States came over and integrated California, and all the stuff that's happened in California since then, like the California missions, and how it was really harmful to indigenous people. It was basically forced labor camps, and it's a little silly nowadays. When I was in fourth grade and I asked my students back in fourth grade if they still did this, and they said yes, which would have been about 5-6 years ago for them, was we had to create a model of a California mission. And really, what these California missions were forced labor camps for indigenous people that also Christianized them. So these places were places of horror for a lot of people. And in fourth grade, they have us make models of these. I think that's something that we should definitely stop. But we should really teach our California history, what happened with those missions, what happened with the Japanese internment camps, and the cultures and the history that was here before.
George Johnson Hamilton, will you be interested in urban gardening within school grounds, particularly involving edible education?
Yes, actually, a lot of our schools actually have gardening programs. I would love to implement more, urban gardening at every single school, not only so students can learn, how to support themselves, how to grow food, because a lot of the communities in our area, they grown their own food. They have their own chickens and ducks, and they they grow beautiful rose gardens, and some of the houses I've been canvassing to, I walk in and I feel like a forest because there's a lot of older citizens in our communities that really take pride in their gardening and their skills. One of the things I've been advocating for is creating a program where we can take these older people who have these skills, and bring them into our after school programs to teach students how to grow food, how to have fruit trees, how to take care of these flowers, because it's a skill that is unfortunately being lost as time goes on, and it could be reintroduced into our communities. And one plan I also have, not even I was thinking about this, even if I lose, is to create a larger East LA community garden and create kind of like a free market where people can bring their food that they grow and trade it with other people. So, and that would be awesome to even get the schools in on that, so we can provide that edible education. And I think that also goes along with my sorry, I'm advocating for a Green New Deal in public schools. So not only is that with like greening our infrastructure and bringing in gardens, but also putting solar panels in our schools and making it run on 100% renewables, so we can prepare our students for our future that we need to be moving forward to in a nationwide Green New Deal, and teach them and train them about these technologies, so they're the ones that are taking up the mantle for the future. And also to hopefully, if we can institute it as a district level, it'd be an example for across the country on how a Green New Deal works, and hopefully demystifies it. Because right now, from what I know, we have not instituted in any locality, and I think it would be awesome if we be one of the first ones to do this and be a shining example for state and governments, local governments, and even the federal government.
And that would be an opportunity to rebuild the school infrastructure that's been destroyed. Started with Reagan, what really got it, what was it, Prop 13 in the 70s, which limited the amount of property tax goes to the state.
Yes,
Yeah,
and it's also it's good for old owners who bought their houses in the 70s and 80s, because it keeps their property taxes from going too high. And I've been telling people it's like rent control for people's property taxes. It can only raise a certain percentage every year. Even if your house doubles in value, um, you only get a 3% increase. I think we really need to. I don't really want to put more of a higher tax burden on homeowners. I really think we need to you find ways to tax these large corporations in California, um, to pay up for the difference. But also, I think it's unfair. Like if you have a $800,000 house that you bought 30 years ago versus someone today who bought one, and you pay more property taxes just because the year you brought it in, I think that's unfair. I think we need to find a way to make it even for and equal for everyone, because really it's putting the tax burden on younger people who already have a hard time, you know, finding places to rent, finding good and decent jobs. So I think there's a compromise that can be made with that proposition, but also we need to move the tax burden to the billionaires who aren't paying taxes right now as well.
yeah, I can just say I can certainly see the difference in the schools I went to, and the rec center, city rec center that I went to. Now it's called the Martin Luther King Center, but I went to it before, he was assassinated. So it was just a San Mateo Rec Center. And they went downhill. I mean, to the point where the rec center was closed, nothing but graffiti on it, broken windows. It's since been rehabbed as the peninsula in San Francisco gentrified and just had more resources. But there was a period there in the 80s where the state wasn't providing the resources that it used to, and particularly in the working class communities, things went downhill. Um, so yeah, Green New Deal, not just for the clean energy, but just for the basic infrastructure. could really improve the schools.
Yeah, the electricity costs are very high in our communities. Believe we have some of the highest electricity costs in the country besides Hawaii. And um, what I've been also telling people is like, hey, if we are able to institute a Green New Deal in our schools, all that leftover power, especially in the summers when those schools aren't being used, can be sold back to our community, and it would reduce the electricity rates. And that's something that people are very interested in. And hopefully, later, uh, I can also push people to localize our uh, utilities, but I think that's something that's been grabbing people's attention right now because electricity is very expensive in California right now.
Yeah, and all your governor wants to do is subsidize Diablo Canyon, uh, disregard calls to socialize Pacific Gas and Electric. Is the Montebello School District in the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles, what is it called, the Gas and Water Company or Power
No,
Company?
we're under California Edison. It's literally, yeah, we're like one neighborhood over from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
Yeah. Well, Los Angeles is one of the biggest municipal power companies in the country, and they potentially could do a lot. But anyway,
Yes.
we had another question there. George Johnson Hamilton, will you include home economics with your teaching Green New Deal and greening economics?
Yeah, I think one thing we really need to do, because the Green New Deal is not just about, solar energy. It's really about revitalizing our infrastructure. An even stronger and uh, powerful program than the New Deal from the post World War during the World War II era. I think we need to bring back home economics. We need to bring back shop. We need to bring forklift classes. We need to offer classes that would go for offer credits for trade school. We need to bring in union apprenticeships into our programs because we need people who can wire electric wires. We need plumbers. We need welders. We need people who know how to uh, balance checkbooks and everything that home economics has to offer, like cooking and cleaning their own place. We need all those types of activities for students, not only because it's helping us in the future, but also like kids really like those things to learn things hands on, because that develops a love for learning. And really, we can have the best teachers, we could have the best run district, but if we don't find ways to teach kids how to love learning, how to look forward to those classes that they really like woodshop or home economics, it the learning's not going to get done. So I really push forward any program that we used to have that we have cut the funding for, that students and parents really want to bring back.
Yeah, I think home economics is needed so people are not such easy prey for the predatory lenders, who are not just the payday loan shops, but stores that offer credit and banks that offer uh, deals that are too good to be true when you look at the details. There's just a lot there where I think people get suckered in when if they had a little bit of knowledge and skill to like figure out what they're really paying, they wouldn't get ripped off. Via email, our schools are often major sources of stability in our communities. How can we utilize schools to offer even more support to the broader community?
So what's being talked about a lot right now in California, and Montebello Unified is getting one school right now, is bringing community schools into our district. And what a community school is we collaborate with the surrounding community on how to best support our students. And I've been talking about what I believe a community school is. And a community school would have a closet for students to come in and get new clothes, because a lot, kids, they grow really fast, and a lot of families, we're penny pinching right now, and students need free closets that can come to into our schools and pick out clothes. We need grocery programs for our kids who are going home hungry and they can't learn in school because they're too hungry. We need to bring a universal head start. I think would be a good thing for our community schools. because right now, you have to qualify for free Head Start. You have to make less than $28,000, and that is no one in California. You need to make more than that to survive. So no one is qualifying for these free programs. I think we need to get rid of that income cap and just let anyone who wants to come to Head Start or preschool, we should do it. Part of community schools is giving the community living wages to work in our schools so they can live in our community and they can only have that one job and support themselves. We need to bring in non-citizen voting. We need to bring in all of our community to vote for our school board and to vote for our city councilors. And I know there's several municipalities that have done this, so it's literally just copy paste, put in our district, our cities, and let non-citizens vote, because these things affect their communities. These things affect their children. I think they should have a say. And we really supporting families. Like I said earlier, like, hey, do we need washers and dryers? Do we need to make sure? Do we need to set up carpool for your students? Do we need to let's come in and bring you and teach you someone let's teach you things that only someone with a master's degree has learned, when you should know these best practices for your student at home, that you should be reading to them 20 minutes a day, that you should be doing this with them, that things that they don't know through no fault of their own, we should be providing workshops and classes for our community to come in and learn these things, how to make sure their students are on the right track for when they come to us. I think really building a community school is just really building a community center that offers not only just education, but any single facet of life for our communities.
Good. Let's get Aaron's website up there again. Where can we donate to Aaron? There we go.
Yeah, so on my link tree, you'll be able to go and it'll have everything from volunteer, donate, my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If you want to go to my website, it's reveles4musd.com. So how you see on the screen, except it's the word for. So it'll be REVELESFORMUSD.com as well.
Yeah, you heard Aaron earlier. The other candidates are spending 10 to 15 times what he is. These so-called nonpartisan Democrats, everybody knows what party people are in, even though it doesn't label them on the ballot.
Yeah.
So sounds like Aaron has a real shot. So this might be a good place to put some of your, political money into. So please give Aaron a donation.
Yeah, I think along with that, a lot of people they're coming a little bit sick and tired of Democrats doing nothing, especially in California. I know New York is similar, but I don't know how similar. But in California, we have a supermajority Democrat assembly. So 80% of our state senators and 80% of our state assembly members are Democrats. So really, if they wanted to make revolutionary change across our state, they could if they wanted to. There's no like, hey, we need to stop these Republicans in California. That's pretty much they've been effectively defeated in California for a long time, and it's time to start looking at independent and green and peace and freedom and other socialist candidates to elect across of our state, because the Republicans aren't a problem anymore. It's the Democrats that are getting in our way of making this change.
Yeah, New York's like California. Super majorities, veto-proof majorities in both chambers, and a Democratic governor. And they promised when they got control of the Senate in 2018, they would finally pass a single-payer plan, for a public health insurance program that the Assembly had passed many times since 1992. And once they got the power, they can't even get that bill. They won't take that bill out of committee. And I know
Exactly.
in California, same thing. Once they got the power, suddenly they had problems with single payer. So, we know what that's about. It's about the health insurance industry giving big bucks to the Democratic Party. And that's who they answer to, their donors, not their voters. So, yeah, same thing here in New York. And the thing about the Republicans, yeah, they can't win, but the Democrats still say if you run as a green, you're spoiling the election. And when we actually run, we beat the Republicans. come in second to the Democrats, at least in a lot of local races. Haven't been able to do that statewide yet.
Yeah, the same thing's happening here. A lot of the times we'll get, especially because of our top two primary, we'll have across the state where we win our third party candidates. They win the second spot, so they move on to the primaries against the Democrat. But they still use the same logic, like, oh, we need to vote in Democrats. We can't, go third party. And it's like, your argument makes no sense when it's just between a Democrat and a Green or a Democrat and a Peace and Freedom party. It falls apart. But you have enough money to send mailers and text messages and emails to every single person across the state, and we don't. So that's why you're winning, even though our program is more popular.
Yeah, that top two you got, they're trying to spread to other states with top 4 or top 5. Alaska's got top 4. And that really destroys parties because it takes the nomination out of the hands of the party and puts everybody in an open jungle primary. And of course, the candidates with the best name recognition and the most money to get that name recognition come out ahead. So in California, we just saw this again in Alaska with top 4. Third parties rarely made it through in California or Alaska because, if a district is majority, say Republican, you're going to get mostly Republicans. In California, 2 Republicans, opposite with Democrats. Third parties never make it to the general election, or very rarely. And what also happens, and I've seen this with the Greens in California, is the state party will, endorse a candidate, but then other Greens who are enrolled in the party just say, well, I'm going to run anyway.
Yeah.
So then the rank and file Green, who's just registered Green and wants to vote for the Green Party, they get to this jungle primary and they see 3 Greens. And they're like, well, which one is the one we should support? So it just takes it out of the hands of the party and puts it in the hands of atomized voters who are not connected to the party, don't talk to each other. They're just presented with names. They don't even know who the people are. And so they, roll the dice. It's a terrible reform. Now they link it to ranked choice voting. And I think one of the things we got to do is de-link those two. Ranked choice voting is good, but open primaries are not good, especially for a party like the Green Party. In New York, mostly it's closed primaries, but parties have the option of opening up. So the old Reform Party that grew out of the Buchanan movement, they ran a candidate for mayor. They ran a primary to nominate the candidate for mayor, and they opened it up because their strategy was to get the non-enrolled and people from other parties that might want to vote in the Reform Party. I guess in New York, they'd had to been non-enrolled. So they wanted to open it up to the non-enrolled or small I independents. So it's an option in New York. I think that's the right policy. But we got a movement here that wants top 4 or 5 and mandatory open primaries for all the parties. So this is an issue that's coming and people need to be ready for it.
Yeah,
it's already on the ballot this election, I think in Nevada, and it's coming in other states. There's a lot of Silicon Valley money behind this move.
Yeah, I really like the fusion voting y'all have in New York, because a lot of the time, the Green and Peace and Freedom candidates, we align, 99% of the time, and we endorse each other's candidates. But like you said, the people who are just registered as our parties, they don't see that stuff. And it would be awesome if we can do what y'all did and, put each other on each other's ballot lines so people can see that these people are supported by 2 different parties. I think that's something that we also need in California.
Yeah, I personally am for fusion. Green Party in New York has an official position against it. Because mostly what we've seen is you have the 2 major parties, then a bunch of satellite parties that, bargain to get, jobs or money in order to get the ballot line for the major party candidate. But we have had cases where a guy who's now a Democrat, but he ran for city council as a Green, and he had the Green Party line, and then he petitioned to put up a Socialist line. So he was on both. Our party, when it comes to fusion under the existing law, we permit fusion with other independent left parties, but not with the Democrats, Republicans, or their satellite parties, which I think is a good policy. So, yeah, Fusion is actually losing ground. They eliminated it in South Carolina. The current election is the last election they'll have it. So I think it's now down to 7 states or 6 states instead of 7 or 8. Okay, well, our hour's up. I really appreciate you coming on, Aaron, and I'm going to make a donation and wish you the best. And you sound like somebody we really need on a school board, which is an important position. I think people, from the chats, a lot of people recognize that, but a lot of so-called left activists, they're taking care of the big national and international stuff, and they're not paying attention to what's going on in their own community. And that's where we got to start. If the left parties are not in the communities, then we're just an abstraction to the larger voters. So, thanks for running and good luck. And I wrote down your website, so I'll get on it in a little bit and send you what I can. So once again, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
To go with your last comment, how you were talking about we need to really hit these local levels. I've been listening to your Green Socialist Organizing podcast, you and Chris and the other people who work on it, and I really think we need to make a socialist movement that hits these local seats, just like the Republicans and their Tea Party movement. They went for their city councils, their town halls, and their school boards, and they really developed a movement inside the Republican Party that overtook the Republican Party. And I think we need to do the same, except for the third parties. And we need to bring these socialist candidates to our city council and our school board level where we can win and where our platform is very popular. And we just need a very small, dedicated team to win these seats to really develop a base for our parties in the future.
Yeah, I see a comment in the chat about the doctor we hope to have on last week. She will be on next week. That's Claire Cohen. And I want to say amen to what Aaron just said. The difference between what the right did, taking over the Republican Party, and what we're doing is we're feeling a huge political vacuum. Most Americans do not agree with corporate neoliberalism from the Democrats, let alone authoritarian, anti-democratic policies from the Republicans. They are, if you look at the polls, what the Greens stand for is what, large majorities stand for, particularly on the economic class and increasingly the social policy issues. So there's a political vacuum there, but we can't fill it at the state or national level until we've, seeded the grassroots with a movement and people who do get elected. So then when we run at the next level, people say, hey, we elected them locally. We know who they are. Yeah, we can put them in the state legislature or the House of Representatives. So that's the path forward. And let's see what we can do about it this week. I appreciate everybody being here, and we'll see y'all next week.